Welcome to another deep dive. This time, we're going to try to untangle the U.S. immigration system,
Yeah,
a topic that I know you're really interested in, especially trying to
right.
get to the bottom of humanitarian parole.
Right?
You've got like a whole stack of resources here,
Yeah.
a fact sheet from the American Immigration Council,
Uh,
official government websites,
of course.
even a resource hub aimed at helping immigrants.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in.
It is a lot to take in, and I gotta say, some of what we've learned is surprising,
Yeah.
even to me, somebody who like follows this stuff.
Yeah, it's true. The U.S. immigration system is really fascinating
Yeah.
because it really tries to juggle a lot of different things,
Mhm.
bringing families together,
Yeah.
boosting the economy with skilled workers,
Right.
offering a safe haven,
Yeah.
creating a diverse population.
It is like this giant balancing act,
Yeah.
and it seems like humanitarian parole is playing a growing role in that. But let's back up for a second. The American Immigration Council fact sheet really emphasizes family as like this core
Yeah.
part of the system.
Absolutely.
Right.
Family-based immigration is huge.
Yeah.
U.S. citizens and green card holders can sponsor certain family members,
Okay.
but it's not as easy as just saying, oh, they're family, come on in.
Right.
There's a distinction between what they call immediate relatives and those who fall under this whole preference system.
Okay, so immediate relatives would be like spouses and children,
Exactly.
whereas other relatives like siblings face more like
Right, more hurdles.
hurdles and limitations.
Exactly, yeah.
Got it.
The system wants to prioritize keeping families together,
Mm,
but they also have to manage the number of people who are coming in each year.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
So what about people who are coming to the U.S. for work?
Right. That's what they call employment-based immigration.
Hmm.
And there, it's all about skills and qualifications.
Okay.
Think doctors, scientists, artists, even investors who create jobs.
Wow.
The U.S. wants to attract talent that will actually benefit the economy.
So it's kind of like a point system for your resume.
Exactly.
I like that.
Yeah.
Um, does anything in those employment categories stand out to you?
Uh, that's a good question. It
Yeah.
really makes you think about how your own skills might,
Yeah.
fit into the U.S. job market, right?
Totally.
But it's just one piece of this very large puzzle.
Right, right.
Yeah.
We also had the diversity visa program,
Yeah.
which is like a lottery system for people from countries that are underrepresented in immigration.
Yeah, they try to keep things balanced and diverse.
I think that's a pretty cool idea.
It is.
Yeah.
But even seemingly random systems like that, they have real-world consequences.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Remember the 2020 diversity visa program issues?
I do vaguely, yeah.
Immigration bans froze the program,
Oh, right.
leaving a lot of lottery winners in limbo.
Oh, wow.
Some even sued the government over it.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, it just shows that even with good intentions, the system is far from perfect.
Right, and speaking of systems,
Yeah,
you mentioned earlier the U.S. wants to offer safe haven.
right.
So this is where humanitarian concerns come in.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And specifically, what you mentioned earlier, humanitarian parole.
Yeah.
We're talking refugees, asylees, and humanitarian parole.
Okay.
They all involve offering protection, but the details are really important.
Okay, so let's break it down.
Okay?
Refugees and asylees.
Yeah.
I hear those terms all the time, but what's the difference?
Right. They both involve seeking safety,
Mm-hmm.
but the key difference is where they apply.
Okay.
Refugees apply from outside the U.S.,
Got it.
saying they can't return home
Right.
because they have a well-founded fear of persecution.
Mm-hmm.
Asylees are already in the U.S. when they ask for protection.
So it's about their location
Yeah.
at the time they're seeking safety.
Exactly.
Got it.
Yeah.
So where does humanitarian parole fit into all this?
Okay, humanitarian parole, it's kind of like a special pass. Granted, on a case-by-case basis for urgent situations,
Okay.
it lets people enter the U.S. even if they don't meet the typical visa requirements.
So it's like for exceptional circumstances.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember reading about how it's been used recently for Ukrainians
Right.
and some groups from Latin America and the Caribbean.
That's right.
Right.
The war in Ukraine and instability in certain Latin American and Caribbean countries
Hmm.
led to the U.S. using humanitarian parole to offer temporary refuge.
Okay.
It's a way to respond quickly to events happening around the world,
Yeah.
but it's really important to understand that parole doesn't guarantee permanent status.
So even if you're granted humanitarian parole, you still need to figure out
Right.
a longer-term solution if you want to stay in the U.S.
Right.
It's not a direct path to citizenship.
Exactly. Someone granted parole might need to apply for asylum
Hmm.
or explore family sponsorship if they want to stay permanently.
It's a temporary safe haven,
Right.
not a guarantee.
Not a guarantee, yeah.
Yeah, that's really crucial to understand.
It is.
Yeah, and while we're on the topic of temporary solutions,
Okay.
we should mention things like temporary protected status,
Uh-huh.
deferred enforced departure, and DACA,
Right.
deferred action for childhood arrivals.
Yes.
Right, I've heard of those, especially DACA.
Mm-hmm.
They offer like temporary relief,
Yeah.
but they're not permanent solutions, are they?
Exactly.
Yeah.
They offer a reprieve from deportation
Okay.
and sometimes work authorization, but they depend heavily on the political climate
Yeah.
and can change drastically with a new administration.
So it seems like there are a lot of nuances to the U.S. immigration system,
There are.
especially when it comes to these humanitarian concerns.
Yeah.
We've got a good foundation, I think, on the various paths to the U.S.,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm particularly interested in digging deeper into how humanitarian parole works in practice,
Yeah.
given that it seems to be used more and more.
I agree. It's a fascinating and evolving aspect of the system
Yeah.
and one that is worth understanding more deeply. Yeah.
Shall we explore that further?
Absolutely. Let's dive in.
It definitely seems like humanitarian parole is becoming a more prominent tool in the U.S. immigration system.
Yeah.
It's a way to kind of respond to those really urgent situations
Mm-hmm.
where the traditional pathways just aren't flexible enough.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But how does it actually work?
Okay.
You mentioned the programs for Ukrainians
Right.
and certain groups from Latin America and the Caribbean.
Yeah.
Can you walk us through like a couple examples of those?
Sure. So let's start with Uniting for Ukraine,
Okay.
which was launched in 2022.
Mm-hmm.
It allows U.S. citizens and organizations to sponsor Ukrainians fleeing the war,
Okay.
giving them permission to live and work in the U.S. for up to 2 years.
So it's not just the government deciding who gets parole.
Right.
Ordinary citizens can actually play a role.
Yeah,
That's pretty remarkable.
it is. It's been really crucial for
Yeah.
many Ukrainians who might not have qualified for refugee status,
Right.
but desperately needed a safe haven.
It's really kind of changed the game.
It's interesting to see this private sponsorship model
Yeah.
being used. The resource hub we looked at
Yeah.
also mentioned a similar program for Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans.
That's right.
Right.
In early 2023, the Biden administration announced a parole program for those nationalities,
Mm-hmm.
again, with a really heavy emphasis on private sponsorship.
Okay.
It allows eligible individuals to come to the U.S. for up to 2 years,
Got it.
similar to Uniting for Ukraine.
So we're seeing a trend here.
It seems like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think this citizen sponsorship model signals a broader shift in how the U.S. approaches humanitarian relief?
It's definitely a development worth watching.
Okay.
There are strong arguments on both sides.
Absolutely.
Supporters of these parole programs
Mhm.
say it allows the U.S. to be more flexible,
Right.
more responsive to crises,
Yeah.
using the generosity of its own citizens to really help out.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
It seems like it could cut through some of that red tape
Right.
that slows down traditional immigration pathways.
Exactly.
But I'm guessing there are concerns about this approach as well.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
Some critics worry that relying too heavily on parole
Mm-hmm.
could weaken the established refugee system.
Okay.
They also point out potential fairness issues,
Right.
saying, this might favor those with connections in the U.S.
Right.
over those who don't.
So it's a complex issue
Yeah,
with valid points on both sides.
it is.
It seems like there's this need to balance compassion and efficiency with fairness
Right.
and long-term planning.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And even with these expanded parole programs, it's crucial to remember
Yeah.
that humanitarian parole is still a temporary solution.
Right.
Doesn't automatically lead to a green card or citizenship.
Right. Recipients still need to find a different pathway if they want to stay in the U.S. permanently.
Exactly.
It's a temporary lifeline, but not a permanent solution.
Yeah, exactly.
But before we move on from humanitarian parole,
Okay.
I'm curious about the criteria used to grant it. Who makes those decisions?
Okay.
And what factors do they consider?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
So the authority to grant humanitarian parole lies with U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services,
Okay.
or USCIS, as they call it.
Mm-hmm.
They consider each case individually,
All right.
looking for a compelling humanitarian reason
Mhm.
or significant public benefit.
So it's not just about fleeing danger.
Right.
There could be other reasons why someone might qualify for parole.
Exactly. For example, someone might be granted parole to receive urgent medical treatment in the U.S.
Oh, wow.
or to testify in a court case even if they wouldn't qualify for a regular visa.
So it's a powerful tool when used appropriately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But given its discretionary nature,
Right.
I imagine it can also be quite controversial,
Yeah.
right?
For sure.
The use of humanitarian parole has been subject to a lot of debate, with some folks arguing that it's been overused or even abused for political purposes.
Mm-hmm.
Others maintain that it's a really vital tool for addressing humanitarian crises
Okay.
and providing individual relief in exceptional circumstances.
It's a reminder that immigration policy is often intertwined with politics.
Yeah.
And there's rarely a simple answer.
It's true.
Speaking of complexity,
Yeah.
the fact sheet also talked about how the U.S. manages immigration from different countries.
Ah, yes, the per-country ceilings.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, it's a way to ensure no single country dominates U.S. immigration.
Okay.
It's about maintaining diversity
Right.
and preventing bottlenecks from specific regions.
So if a large number of people from one country are already immigrating to the U.S.,
Yeah.
it might be harder for others from that same country to get in,
Right.
even if they qualify.
Exactly. It's like a balancing act.
Wow.
Yeah.
But shifting gears a bit,
Okay.
let's talk about the options for those who have already made it to the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
and have secured lawful permanent residency.
Right.
Green card holders.
Yeah, right.
The ultimate goal for many is citizenship,
Right.
but it's not automatic, is it?
Not at all.
Yeah.
Naturalization, that's the process of becoming a U.S. citizen,
Mm-hmm.
requires meeting certain criteria,
Yeah.
like residing in the U.S. for a certain period,
Okay.
passing English and civics tests.
Right.
It's a big step, but remember, it's not a requirement for those with green cards.
So someone could live their whole life in the U.S. as a permanent resident
Yeah,
without ever becoming a citizen.
that's right.
Wow.
There are pros and cons to both paths,
Mhm.
and ultimately it's a personal decision based on their individual circumstances and priorities.
It's fascinating how much choice and individual agency is involved,
Yeah.
even within a system as complex and regulated as immigration.
It's true.
But we've covered a lot of ground here: family, employment, humanitarian concerns,
Mm-hmm.
the path to citizenship.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up, I'd love to get your thoughts on what all this means for the future of U.S. immigration.
Okay.
What trends should we be watching?
Yeah.
What big questions are still unanswered?
That's the perfect segue into our final thoughts.
Okay.
The U.S. immigration system is constantly evolving,
Yeah.
and there's a lot to consider as we look ahead.
So we've covered a ton in this deep dive.
We have.
From family reunification
Uh,
to employment-based immigration.
yeah.
From refugees and asylees to, like, the really nitty-gritty of humanitarian parole. It's clear that the U.S. immigration system is like this complex web of
Mm.
policies, priorities, and, like, global influences.
It really is.
Yeah.
And, as we look ahead,
Mm.
it's likely to only become more complex.
Oh, I'm sure.
There are several trends that are worth watching,
Yeah.
particularly the growing reliance on humanitarian parole and private sponsorship.
Right, these recent parole programs for Ukrainians.
Yeah.
And certain groups from Latin
Yeah.
America and the Caribbean,
Yeah.
they seem to be, like, signaling a potential shift
Right.
in how the U.S. responds to humanitarian crises.
It's certainly possible.
Yeah.
The use of parole allows for a more, agile response.
Mhm.
It cuts through some of that red tape
Right.
associated with more traditional refugee programs.
Yeah, it seems more efficient,
Mhm.
but it also raises questions about fairness and access.
It does.
Yeah.
If private sponsorship becomes like this dominant model,
Right.
how do we ensure that those without connections in the U.S.
Right.
aren't disadvantaged?
Yeah. How do we balance compassion with equitable access?
Yeah, those are crucial questions
Yeah.
that policymakers need to address.
Absolutely.
And beyond humanitarian parole, there are other factors shaping the future of U.S. immigration.
Mm-hmm.
The debate over border security continues,
Right.
and the impact of climate change on migration patterns is
Yeah.
becoming increasingly significant.
It's a lot to consider.
It is.
But I think this deep dive has given us a good framework for
Yeah.
understanding the key issues
Mhm.
and the different perspectives
Yeah.
at play. We've explored the various pathways, the different statuses,
Right.
and, like, the ways in which global events and political decision
Yeah,
impact the system.
absolutely.
It's really complicated.
It is.
But as you continue to learn and engage with this, complex issue,
Yeah.
I encourage you to think critically about the trends we've discussed.
Absolutely.
Given the rise of humanitarian parole,
Uh-huh.
the role of private sponsorship,
Mhm.
and the ongoing debates over border security and enforcement,
Right.
do you think the U.S. is moving toward a more open or a more restrictive approach to immigration?
That's a great question to ponder.
Yeah, there's no easy answer,
No.
but it gets to the heart of, like, what we've been discussing.
It does.
The U.S. immigration system is constantly evolving, reflecting those changing priorities
Right.
and grappling with the challenges of, like, a globalized world.
Exactly.
And it's important to remember that behind all the policies and statistics
Yeah.
are human stories.
Right.
People making really difficult choices,
Yeah.
seeking safety and opportunity,
Hmm.
navigating a system that can often feel very overwhelming.
Absolutely.
We can't lose sight of that human dimension.
We can't.
So to our listener,
Yeah.
we hope this deep dive has provided you with, like, a clearer understanding
Yeah.
of the U.S. immigration system,
Absolutely.
its complexities, and its potential for both challenge and change.
For sure.
Keep exploring,
Yeah.
keep asking questions, and keep engaging with this important topic.
For sure.
Until next time, happy diving.